Imagine for a moment that everything you thought you knew about our planet was wrong. The globe we spin in classrooms, the blue marble we see from space, is a massive, elaborate lie. What if the Earth isn't a sphere? What if it's flat? Like a giant cosmic pancake? Sounds absurd, right? A relic of ancient, unenlightened times. But there's a movement, a surprisingly vocal one, that truly believes we're living on a giant stationary disk. So if it were flat, how would anything actually work? How would the oceans stay put? What about the sun, the moon, the stars? What would happen if we sailed too far? Today, we're going to put on our most open-minded hats and seriously ask, could the flat earth people be right? Let's check that. For most of human history, the shape of the earth wasn't exactly settled science. Early civilizations had all sorts of ideas. Many ancient cultures, like the early Egyptians and the Babylonians, did envision a flat earth. Makes sense. If you don't have space rockets, everything looks pretty flat from where you're standing. The ancient Egyptians, they believed the sky was a literal dome goddess. Meet Nut, the goddess of the sky, and Jeb, the god of the earth. In Egyptian art, Nut is often depicted as a woman with skin made of stars, arching her body in a perfect bridge over Jeb, who's reclining below her. In this model, the earth, Jeb, is a flat plain of soil and rock. Nut's hands and feet touch the four corners of the earth, creating the canopy of the sky. Between them is Shu, the god of air, who is essentially the cosmic personal trainer holding Nut up so she doesn't crush everyone. This wasn't just a pretty picture. It was their functional flat earth belief. And the sun's daily journey, they believed Nut swallowed the sun every evening at sunset and gave birth to it every morning at sunrise. And the waters above? They thought Nut's body was a barrier protecting the world from the chaos waters that existed outside the universe. Rain happened when those waters leaked through. It's a beautiful, poetic way to see the world, but it highlights the core problem with every flat earth model. It requires a supernatural explanation to keep the lights on. Science, on the other hand, just needs gravity. It's much more efficient. It doesn't need to eat the sun. Just curves space-time and calls it a day. But even way back in ancient Greece, smarty pants like Pythagoras in the 6th century BCE started proposing a spherical earth. Mostly for aesthetic and philosophical reasons, though. A sphere is the most perfect shape, he probably declared while doing math in a toga. Then there was Aristotle in the 4th century BCE. He offered actual evidence. He noticed that as you travel north or south, different constellations became visible. And during lunar eclipses, the Earth's shadow on the moon, it's always a curved arc. And then there was Eratosthenes, a few centuries later. He went full mad scientist and calculated the Earth's circumference with astonishing accuracy, just by comparing shadows in two different cities. Without Rand McNally, mind you. Whoever that is. I'm going to have to check with the writers. By the Middle Ages, the idea of a spherical Earth was pretty much standard among scholars and educated people. The myth of Columbus thinking the Earth was flat is just that, a myth. He was only arguing how big it was. And while we're at it, let's clear the air on Christopher Columbus.
He didn't prove the world was round. That knowledge was already profound. Yeah!
Most of us were taught that Columbus was a visionary who defied the flat earthers of his day to prove the world was round. But by 1492, literally every educated person in Europe, the church, the kings, the sailors, they all knew the earth was a globe. They'd known it for nearly 2,000 years. The big debate for Columbus wasn't about the shape. It was about the size. Columbus was actually the one who was wrong. He thought the Earth was much smaller than it actually was. He convinced himself Asia was right where the Americas are. The experts who tried to stop him weren't flat earthers. They were just better at math. They told him, Chris, you're going to run out of food and die in the middle of a giant ocean because the world is way bigger than you think. He only survived because he accidentally bumped into the Bahamas. And since we're debunking, let's talk about how he discovered America. It's hard to discover a place where millions of people were already living and had a successful civilization. It's like me discovering your house while you're eating dinner and claiming your couch for Spain. And how about the Queen sold her jewels to fund him? Trust me, Queen Isabella didn't need to pawn her earrings. The voyage was a calculated business investment funded by Italian bankers and the Spanish crown. Let's figure out what a flat Earth would look like. The most popular model today is basically a giant stationary disk with the North Pole at the center. And around the entire circumference, a massive, impenetrable ice wall, Antarctica. Its purpose? To keep the oceans from spilling off the edge. Because gravity works on water until it hits the edge. And then it just stops and says, meh, it's all good. The sun and the moon, they're much smaller than we think. And they circle above the disk like spotlights, a few thousand miles up. The stars, also above us, probably just lights on a dome or firmament. Space travel, satellites, all a hoax. NASA, just an elaborate special effects studio. Every photo of Earth from space, CGI. But you know what? I'm not going to let any of that deter me. Our mission, should we choose to accept it, is try to make this work. Can we explain how flat Earth would function without breaking everything? All right, first up, the big one. How do oceans stay put on a giant flat disk? On a sphere, gravity pulls everything towards the center, which is why water stays on the surface. On a flat Earth, gravity becomes rather selective. Flat earthers propose a few ideas. Some suggest the ice wall of Antarctica is enough. Others propose a mysterious force called density and buoyancy, but not the way physics understands those terms. The problem is, if gravity were pulling straight down on a flat plane, water at the edges would absolutely flow off. It's like water pouring on a dinner plate. It doesn't just stick there perfectly stacking up, defying all logic. Okay, and next we have ships disappearing hull first over the horizon. How does that work? On a round Earth, it's simple. The curve of the Earth obstructs your view. On a flat Earth, this shouldn't happen. A ship just gets smaller and smaller until it vanishes into a tiny speck. Flat earthers suggest atmospheric perspective, light refraction, or simply the limits of human vision. Because their explanation is, it just looks like it's going over the horizon, but it's not. Also, if the Earth were flat, a lighthouse beam would be visible from much farther away than it actually is. Try seeing a beam from a lighthouse 200 miles away. You can't, because there's a giant curve in between you and the lighthouse. On a flat Earth, the sun and moon are often depicted as smaller, closer, and orbiting above the disk. This creates immediate problems. If the sun is a spotlight, how do we get day and night? It would illuminate a circular patch, but then the whole rest of the disk would be in a perpetual twilight. not proper darkness. Now, how do seasons work? On a globe, Earth's tilt relative to its orbit causes seasons. On a flat Earth, the sun would have to dramatically change its orbital path and altitude throughout the year to create seasonal variations, which starts to get incredibly complicated. And then there's the stars. If they're just little lights on a dome, why do different stars and constellations appear in different hemispheres? Polaris, the North Star, is only visible in the northern hemisphere. The Southern Cross is only visible in the southern hemisphere. On a flat disk, you should be able to see all of them, all the time. Unless, of course, the stars are just shy and only come out when you're looking at them from the right angle. Which, that's definitely how light works. Okay, if Earth is flat, then satellites, space stations, and any photos from space are all hoaxes. NASA is just making stuff up. But airline pilots fly routes that make no sense on a flat map. A flight from Santiago, Chile to Sydney, Australia often goes over Antarctica. On a flat map, that's an incredibly inefficient giant detour. On a globe, it's the shortest route. And what about GPS? It relies on a network of satellites orbiting a spherical Earth. If Earth were flat, your phone's GPS wouldn't just be a little off. It would be catastrophically wrong all the time, everywhere. And astronauts, hundreds of them from dozens of countries, all in on the biggest secret in human history. The Russians, the American, the Chinese, Europeans, all working together to lie about the shape of our planet. That's a level of international cooperation that would make the Avengers look like a dysfunctional book club. So, what have we found? Every single scientific principle we understand, gravity, optics, astronomy, orbital mechanics, completely fall apart the moment you try to flatten the Earth. You'd need a completely different set of physics, new rules for light, new rules for water, new rules for how things move through space. You wouldn't just be tweaking a theory, you'd be inventing an entirely new universe. And for what? So hundreds of different governments and thousands of scientists can all keep the greatest secret ever? The biggest argument against the flat Earth isn't just a satellite photo. It's the simple, undeniable fact that if it were true, literally nothing in our daily lives, from a simple flight path to your phone's GPS, would function the way that it does. The Earth is a sphere, or more accurately, an oblate spheroid, slightly bulging at the equator due to its rotation. It's not perfect, but it's definitely not flat. And the flat Earth isn't just a bad map. It's a tiny view of a massive reality. If we were living on a stationary disk under a dome, the universe would be a small, claustrophobic place. But the globe is an open door. It means we're part of a grand spinning dance through a vacuum that doesn't care about our up or down. We don't live on a pancake. We live on a spaceship made of rock and water, held together by the invisible hand of physics. And frankly, it's a lot cooler than a giant ice wall. Well, that's it for this episode of Let's Check That. I'm Will. And until next time, remember, curiosity's good. Verification, it's better.
Time to set the record straight. Let's get this history up to date. He didn't discover that's a myth. Indigenous people were living with it. He didn't prove the world